All right. Well, so to start this episode out, I'm going to acknowledge that this is our deep dive for Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. Before we get into the conversation about that book, I'm just going to talk about some other books that are coming up in the future that I'm excited about, that most likely I will have the authors on the podcast. So this is part flex, part like begging you guys, please come back and keep listening to me. So if you're here because you like Stephen Graham Jones, this is my way of saying, hey, here's other cool authors that probably I will be talking to soon. The first one, the most, actually, I don't have a physical arc of the next person I'm talking to, but tomorrow I'm recording an interview with Cynthia Pelayo, and we're going to talk about her book, Forgotten Sisters.
Nice.
Which I am most of the way through, and it's fantastic, and it's Chicago, and I live in Chicago, and it's so good. So I'm very excited about that, but I don't have a pretty thing to hold up for that one. I got a digital arc, thanks to Thomas and Mercer for that. The next one I have scheduled after Cynthia is Eric LaRocca and his book, This Skin Was Once Mine and Other Disturbances. So I'll be talking to him, I think, mid-March, and the episode will come out soon.
His book titles are crazy.
Yeah.
They're so wild. I mean, he's not holding any punches back on his book titles.
Have you guys read anything by Eric?
I've got a couple of his books, and Cinna's as well. They're on my TBR shelf.
Yeah. Eric's stuff is just extreme.
That's what I'm hearing.
In a way where it's like, it's so well done. Like, he's got this kind of just raw kind of thing he does, and it's a talent that few people, I think, can pull off. So yeah, I like what I've read of his so far. But yeah, so I'll be talking to Eric soon. He's going to be on the podcast. Another one I have in the books that's going to be later in the fall is this might be hard to see, but for our audio people, Letters to the Purple Satin Killer by Joshua Chaplinsky.
Nice.
Josh, I read and reviewed his book, The Paradox Twins, when that came out. And this is a chunky boy. But one of the things I like about it is it's that epistolary, like it's letters. It's actually letters. So I kind of like that. And Josh has got, it's hard to pin down his style, but he's a damn good writer. And I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
You got some good authors coming up. How exciting.
Yeah. Josh Chaplinsky, I think that's coming out in August. So probably more like summertime is when I'm going to be talking to him. One of the ones I'm very excited about, because I haven't talked to this author in a while, is Paul Tremblay's horror movie.
Nice.
It was beautiful. I was thinking about it, and I saw like this beautiful cover, and I emailed him and I said, "Hey, Paul, I'd really like to do a podcast because it's been a while." And he replied back, and he's like, "Dude, I was just going to email you and ask you if you wanted an arc." So
nice. Oh, that's great.
We haven't scheduled that one, but hopefully I'll get Paul on soon. And then one that's in the mail right now that I'm like Scott Pilgrim when he ordered the thing off of Amazon and then just sat at the door waiting for his package to get delivered, is Zoya Stage is sending me a copy of Dear Hannah, which is coming out in the fall as well, I believe, or at the end of the summer. And for anybody who's not familiar, she wrote Baby Teeth back in 2018, and it's just a phenomenal book. And this is the sequel to Baby Teeth, long hoped for and now super anticipated sequel to Baby Teeth. So those are some of the things that I've got on the horizon. Looking at my little whiteboard over here because it's got more information. But the only other thing that I can say that's definitely locked in is we're going to do a deep dive for the third book in the series, Indian Lake trilogy, The Angel of Indian Lake. And that's going to happen mid-March as well. So that will be coming out soon. So just a little snapshot of things that I've got planned right now. There's a handful of authors' names on here that you might not be able to see, of people who I want to talk to that I haven't set up yet. But yeah, like back in 2018, you guys can back this up or not. I started getting this feeling. It was either 2017 or 2018. I think it was 2018. That like something was going on in horror. And I was like, man, this is a great year for horror. And then I think in 2020, I was talking to Josh Mallerman, and we were like, what's going on with horror? And I think at some point someone had said, like, it's going to be hard to top whatever year it was for horror. And it's just gotten just so much better every year, like unbelievably so. And so I'm not even going to, dare to kind of predict what's going on in horror, what will come. But I'm just so happy, and I'm enjoying the ride right now. There's so much good stuff coming out. So hopefully that'll keep authors showing up on my podcast, and keep lovely people like Greg and Jesse joining me to talk about these books too. So that's kind of what I have on the horizon, or hopefully have on the horizon. But Greg, I know that there's something really interesting that you're in the middle of right now. So is that something you want to talk about a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So, Laird Barron, who in a lot of ways I think rewrote the book on cosmic horror, starting in the early 2000s. He has a new short story collection coming out. It's his fifth collection coming out September 10 from Bad Hand Books. It's called Not a Speck of Light. And in kind of celebration and anticipation of that, his subreddit, the Laird Barron subreddit, I'm the mod on that, and there's a good group of kind of folks who've joined me on something like an editorial team. We've scheduled a read along of his first four collections, starting with the Imago sequence. And folks are it's a very, very popular book. A lot of folks have read these stories. Maybe it's been a while since you've read them, and this is a great opportunity to kind of join us and walk through his early horror fiction in anticipation of the new collection coming up. So we're actually about done with the Imago sequence, so folks can join in on the conversation on the threads that we're posting. About every 5 days, we're posting a new thread for each one of the stories in those four collections, and we'll do the croning as well. Nice. And then Laird he very graciously offered to join us for some webcasts and just take questions from the readers in this community. It's funny because less than 3 years ago, I took over as mod and just started posting stuff about him. And I think it kind of got some folks' attention because there were 66 people in this subreddit when I joined as mod. And then less than 3 years later, we're at like 845 or something like that. And wow. To me, it's says people, and we've added probably 300 in the last 4 or 5 months. People are really discovering Laird. They're rediscovering him and rereading his stories, and are really pouring great insights into his stories. So it's been a lot of fun. And we're doing our first webcast with him about the Imago sequence stories this Saturday. It's February 24th. But anyway, if folks are interested in Laird, maybe they've never read his stories, but they've heard of him, just haven't read his stories before, this read-along is a great opportunity to get involved in that. And we're just so glad to see Laird writing new material and such. And Bad Hand Books published his last book, the Wind Began to Howl, and they'll have his next book coming out as well. But they've been a big supporter of Laird's. And then, sorry, did you want to say?
Sorry, go.
The other thing is, in this box, I have not even opened it yet because I wanted to get through this conversation and then embrace the full joy of opening this. This is the Book of Love by Kelly Link. It just came out a few days ago, less than a week ago, and I'm so excited to open this up. So got my signed, personalized copy of that wonderful first novel from the great Kelly Link, one of the best short story writers out there. So, yeah.
Pulitzer nominee, right? She's got some serious cred.
She was a finalist for one of her collections, but I guess the big accolade that she did win is the MacArthur Genius Grant, which is a big deal. And of course, she and her husband Gavin Grant have a bookstore in East Hampton, Massachusetts, Book Moon Books. And that's, if you want to get a signed, personalized copy of one of her books, you go to their website, you can order that. And I've got over here my Kelly Link shrine over there on the far side of the wall. There has got a copy of all of her books and some rare items as well. So she's fantastic. I've read all of her work, all of Laird's story, all of her fiction, all of Laird's fiction, all of Nathan Ballingrud's fiction. Stephen, I've got all of his books and I'm working my way through them. And then there's all of his short stories. I mean, Stephen's written, I mean,
Yeah.
so many. Like, I think it's 300, about 350 individual pieces of fiction, from flash fiction all the way up to novels. And that doesn't count the nonfiction. And of course, there's a ton of interviews with them. So it's a lot to try to track down and read. But that's one of my main goals right now, is reading all of Stephen's fiction.
That's a tough one to be a completist for. You chose a big mountain. That's the Everest of like of being a completist. Like I'm a big fan of Stephen Hall. He's put out 2 books. That's pretty simple to be a
Yeah.
completist of. But I've
Yes.
got,
Yes.
so like, but yeah, like admire the hustle on that one for sure.
Oh, I mean, I start reading somebody whose work really deeply appeals to me, and it just gets under my skin, and I can't let it go. I want to read everything, and I know, Brian Evanson, Philip Fracassi, Paul Tremblay, John Langan, I think Seth Humboldt, Gemma Files. I mean, these are just
Yeah.
there are a lot of authors whose work I haven't touched at all. It's just because I get into these other authors. I just have got to read everything that they've written, because it's just, there's something about it. I don't know. I think of it like, you read a good book and you're, transported for a few hours, a few days. You read a good author and you're transformed for life.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening to me, especially with, I mean, Stephen's work is just phenomenal, and it's made a real difference in my life, along with Laird and Kelly and Nathan, and just really looking forward to getting into so many other authors as well.
I have to say that in recent years, one of the people who's just like, sometimes you read something and it's almost like it physically damages you, but like in the
Yeah,
best way.
yeah,
I would say that Katrina Ward probably for me is one of the most
yeah,
like profound authors I've discovered recently. I read Last House on Needless Street, I think the year it came out, and I've just been like, and it was like that destroyed me, but I was like, this is so fantastic. And then everything I've read since, like Sundial and Looking Glass Sound and stuff, like everything she writes is just so like, it's beyond impressive. It's like, this is not a human being making this. Like, this is like a evolved, like, consciousness or something. So like, she's been one of the most impressive, like storyteller, story creator people that I've come across recently. But I think that's the issue. The problem, not a problem, like a good problem to have, is like when you read someone and you're like, holy shit, then you automatically want to read everything of theirs.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's so many good people out there. Megan Abbott, I can not tell you how amazing Megan Abbott is. Every time she has a book out, I'm like, I'm going to buy it and then pray that I find time to read it. Silvia Moreno
Yep.
Garcia was an automatic buy now for me. There's so
Yeah.
many people that like, and they just keep piling up. There's new people all the time where I'm like, oh, I read this thing and now I want to read everything of theirs. So yeah,
Well, I mean, literally, people have TBR stacks, TBR piles, TBR carts, right? I've got a to be read. It's a shelf, and
yeah,
it's the same size as this one in the corner here. Um, I'm just, I know I'm preparing for retirement. That's when I'll get to read a lot of these books, and that's totally cool, man. I do also at least tentatively plan to live to be 200, and so I know I can keep collecting at a rapid pace for now.
yeah.
Yeah, I've got 3 of those Catriona Ward books. See Jeffrey Ford up on my shelf, Jeremy Robert Johnson, Jeff Vandermeer,
Ooh, yeah.
and Charles Burns' Black Hole, the comic book graphic novel Black Hole. Mariana Enriquez, just so
Oh yeah. I've heard
Tanana
great
Reed
things about her.
Dew,
Yep.
so many incredible authors. C.J. Leeds' Mayflies on my TBR, Hawk Mountain by Connor Habib, a lot of Alma Katsu, Matt Carden, just so many wonderful authors who, like Catriona, I have not read any of her books yet, but I've listened to a few conversations with her.
Yeah.
She is brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
she is so intensely intelligent and also just delightful and charming.
Yep.
I can't wait to get into those books, and I've heard so much about them.
Yep. And I'll testify. CJ Leeds' Mayfly is fantastic.
Yep.
Anyway, we could just keep going and going like this. We could probably just do a different episode where we just gush about all of the amazing talent that's out there.
Yeah.
Um, but
But to your point, let me just say that if you haven't read the book Dark Stars,
oh yeah,
that's John F. E. Taft.
that's the
Uh,
TAF anthology,
that's the
right?
Taft book. Here it is. Josh Mallerman has. This is a really great collection or anthology. A lot of really terrific stories. But Josh Mallerman's introduction in this really is terrific. And what he says is basically horror is having a moment, and then he creates a kind of a class photo of the people who are like really finding their footing or who are maybe really have a good history within horror publishing. But it's just basically saying, wow, like the field is really strong now. Just reading his foreword or his introduction was just a fascinating read. Yeah,
Yeah.
like these are all people whose works I love.
Absolutely. Okay, I can just tell from Jesse's face that he's dying to talk about Don't Fear the Reaper. So, unless there's anything else, I think we're going to get into it. And I'm going to start just with a quick disclaimer by saying that, first of all, when I had the idea to do these, I reached out to Steven and I said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I thought this would be cool if me and Jesse and Greg got together and talked about deep dived all the books leading up to The Angel of Indian Lake because um, like big super fans and everything, and he was really cool with the idea. And so that's kind of where like that kind of started. But I just want to say because I had a kind of negative comment that came out from our first deep dive. I just want to acknowledge that we are three straight white dudes talking about some experiences that are beyond our ability to kind of authentically have experienced. And so maybe probably should have said something or acknowledged it or thought deeper about how our conversation would impact people. But basically, we are people reacting to a story and talking about how it touched us. And I don't think any of us would ever presume to tell people what that experience is or how people should feel or think about it. So I just wanted to start that conversation that way because it's none of our goal to own the conversation about something. I think we wanted to get together and talk about how something made us feel. So that's the spirit of this, and hopefully we do a good job of navigating that well. But I just wanted to take a moment to say, like, this is in the spirit of this is we want to talk about how this amazing piece of literature touched us as people. And we acknowledge that there are experiences in these books that we can't authentically like speak to or own or anything like that.
Yeah, and perspectives that we just can't have because I'm a man instead of a woman. I'm a white guy, not an indigenous person, and so yeah, like you said, certainly don't pretend to own the conversation in any way, but man, we're excited to participate in the conversation. And when I hear folks whose background or demographic is different from mine and hear their experiences reflecting on any author, but in particular the Indian Lake trilogy, my ears are I'm all ears listening to those perspectives because these stories will hit different people differently, but at the same time I think there's just a universal human core to it that will probably resonate with most people in a pretty similar fashion. But yeah, I'm just happy that that we get to participate in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. I've been thinking about how to start this. I think that we started out like with the previous conversation, really jade worshiping, and like rightfully so.
Yeah.
And I was thinking maybe we take a different approach this time. Maybe not. Because first of all, like when I finished reading My Heart is a Chainsaw, never did it occur to me that there would be more to the story. Like it felt very complete. And like I've heard Stephen Graham Jones on interviews talking about like when maybe in his head it started to become more than just an individual book. His, like being encouraged to not kill everybody at the end of the book and leave people alive and stuff like that, which you guys have probably heard too. And so like when the announcement there was another book coming, I was like, where the hell is this going to go? And this is the core reason I'm not a writer, because like you find out that there's a sequel coming, the first thing you think is what's going to happen, and my mind is just blank. I'm like, what the hell is going to happen?
I feel like my first thought was, what's the title going to be? And I probably, like, my head was probably just coming up with millions of options too. Like, oh, it could be that. Oh, that would work too. Like,
yeah.
it's like,
and how do you top "My Heart Is a Chainsaw"?
Yeah.
that was the thing. Like, how do you go beyond that?
You really, yeah, that's a hard title to top. Well, then tap into, Blue Oyster Cult's incredible song "Don't Fear the Reaper." That's a pretty awesome way to go. And then, of course, the third book being "The Angel of Indian Lake." I think there's the strength is really, I think, in its thematic tie-ins and how it wraps up the entire story. We're not going to go into that, but "Don't Fear the Reaper" is a pretty awesome title too.
Now, I have a question for slasher fan, and I think Jesse's probably going to be the one that's more tied into this than I rewatched the first Scream movie yesterday, maybe because of this conversation that we were going to have. But so there's some things about the Scream. First of all, we know how important the movie Scream is to Stephen Graham Jones in general, but it's also very important to, first of all, the opening of the book. So the initial kills that happen are reflections of the initial kills in the movie Scream. So at the motel when they're playing the Stacey Graves game, and like the two guys, the girl and the boy die, they're killed the way that the first two people die in Scream. So that establishes a bunch of stuff. But one of the things it establishes is that someone's killing people like slasher movies. But the title, "Don't Fear the Reaper," "Don't Fear the Reaper" is a song that happens in the movie Scream, right?
It's also in Halloween. Right. It's in the car when they're driving.
That's right. I rewatched Halloween recently and noticed that. Yeah.
Yep. So, like, definitely a song that's got roots in movies and stuff that are fundamental to Jones, aside from the fact that probably just being the age that he is and being into what he's into, the actual song from Blue Oyster Cult is probably like important to him too. But I thought that was interesting that like we kick off this book titled after that song, which has its appearance in horror movies, with the deaths that are mirroring what the movie Scream starts out with.
Yeah, it comes back later too. Can't remember. Is it maybe Jensen says, "Oh, they recognize their killer," which is kind of we don't get an actual full on "oh" out of Casey Becker in Scream, but it holds on her just enough where you see in her eyes that she recognizes the person that's killing her right now. So that came back in the book too, a second time where we got that, and it's like, well, yeah.
I think it's significant too that in that first chapter, you talk about the slasher trope of, if you're engaged in naughty business as a teenager, that makes you a target of the killer. You're going to die, right? So it's not just Toby and Gwen shacked up in a cheap rent by the hour motel. It's that. Let's ratchet the transgression up a bit by having him go and get out of bed with Gwen and go and chase this other girl he thinks is really into him, so he can maybe sneak some on the side at the same time. Yeah, that's pretty transgressive right there. That's probably going to target you for to get killed by a slasher.
Yeah, it really removes the idea that like this motel kind of encounter could have been like an innocent lover thing, because this dude's just like very obviously a horny teenager. So it takes away. And it does.
One of the best lines there is, "He'll never be this 18 again."
Yes, exactly.
And as much as I could be like, dude, that's so skeezy. Don't do don't go leave one girl to go chase after another when she's just still lying in bed. and he runs off. But then that line's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Yes,
Yep.
he'll never be this 18 again. I get it.
Yep. Yeah, which I think, like, that's a person who's totally embracing, like, I know I'm making a dumb or jerky choice, but like, this is the time of my life I'm supposed to do that. So
yeah.
So, but then beyond that initial kill, it's Dark Mill South, and I have to say, and I don't know if I'm introducing the conversation about this character too soon because it's the very beginning of the book, but like, what a fascinating killer thing. We get a bunch of history about Dark Mill South at the beginning of the book, and
or potential history.
Potential.
I mean, we do hear some things about murders that at least we're not questioning that he took part in, but kind of his origin is very much shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's something that I was thinking as I was reading it, is like, everything's apocryphal. We don't get anything from Dark Mill South directly. So it's all speculation, including like his motives and like what could be attributed to him and what could not, like you said.
I think it serves more to flesh out other characters in the story more than Dark Mill South. It's, they're not Easter eggs, but maybe clues or hints. There's stuff woven in there which relates to multiple people, but the main one, which kind of relates to some of the topics in the trilogy altogether, but also individual characters, is that Sally Schallenberg, the one who first took on Dark Mill South, she, the line was something like, the dark place she went to, she couldn't come back from.
Yep.
And I think that definitely, we could say that is what happened to someone else in this book, and it's also what other people are trying to fight happening to them, because, to go to those levels, which is another weird thing with the idea of the final girl transformation, like, you have to basically rewire your entire brain. It almost seems like, although Jade's proving that wrong, you don't have to compromise. It's possible to be at that level without, but, up until her, I mean, at least in movies, it's kind of been historically portrayed where it's like, you have to transform into a killer to take down a killer.
Yep.
And it's like, but how does someone come back from that? Even when it's a life or death fight, the good guy, so to speak, the hero, the final girl, it's like, they're probably going to have a lot to wrestle with after the fact, even though they did what they needed to do to keep living and breathing. It's like, I still took someone's life, so what does that do to a person's psyche as well?
Yep. Yeah, there's a cost. Even if you survive it, there's a cost. There's a cost to surviving. I think one thing that's real... I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Just a really quick thought. That was one of the beautiful things about doing a trilogy like this and carrying on this one story, is it gives characters an opportunity to or readers, I guess, an opportunity to understand what the long-term effects of trauma are on people, and different people go down different roads because of it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So in the case of Sally, she loses her husband to Dark Mill South in his rampage, and she takes him down, and it's brutal. Even takes his hand off with a shovel, if memory serves. And she's in a psychiatric facility after that. I mean, she doesn't recover from that very well. Jade is not in a psychiatric facility at the end. She's been in one in the past, so she's already seen some rough times, obviously. But she's in prison after My Heart Is a Chainsaw for 4 years. But it's interesting to see that she does transform into the final girl, or is born. Maybe she's been developing as the final girl since she was 11, 12, when she experienced abuse at the hands of her father. But it's interesting to see, she comes back at the beginning of Don't Fear the Reaper, and she is a different person. She's not the punk she used to be. Her hair's grown out long. She's grown up. She looks back at her younger. It's almost like she's forgotten who she was. She doesn't remember all these slasher facts like she could have just quoted. and probably giving you statistics about murder victims and stuff out of the whole body of slasher films, and she's forgotten so much of that. And then you see her transformation back into the final girl is the stripping away of this adulthood into the literally unadulterated version of herself from when she was a teen. Just two things in particular that come to mind is the fact that when she and Letha take on Dark Mill South over in Terra Nova, she's got this big, utility hammer, basically big work hammer. She whacks him in the back of the head with that, and that takes him down pretty effectively for the moment. Well, she loses that hammer out on the ice as they're escaping back to Proof Rock. And what is the weapon that she has when she finally takes on Dark Mill South? It's the litter stick. It's what she had when she was a kind of lackadaisical teen, playing with the litter stick, pretending she, trying to spear cans that she throws in the air or whatever. She's kind of again coming back to being a teen. Or her very cold weather outfit is replaced with her coveralls, and she talks about them being it's not about the warmth they provide, it's armor. And she's wanting to get her eyeliner and put it back on, and she calls herself Jade again. So her transformation is to go back to that terrible fury of being a teen who's been betrayed by her parents. That's the transformation, is to go back to the version, the unadulterated Jade of her teen years.
I was giving a moment in case Jesse had something to pile on that.
No, brilliantly said.
Well, so this kind of takes me to one of the points, or one of the thoughts that I had. So structurally, the first book is basically entirely from the perspective of Jade. And so that gave us a specific experience. But with this book, we see things from other characters' perspectives. And I think that's one of the reasons that I feel like there's more heart in this book. At the very least, I feel like I cried a lot more in this one than in the previous book, at least throughout the book. I know that at the end there was a different story, but like, for example, my example is like, we see things from Hardy's perspective a lot in this book. And just
from Jade's mom, Kimmy, you get
from
some
Jade's
very
mom,
touching moments there.
But like Hardy specifically, like seeing how painful his life is and how important being a father is to him, and having lost his daughter at an early age, and then like having gone through everything with Jade, like this guy is just a big raw heart that's just suffered and taken so much damage throughout the story. And there's one line, I'm going to find it really quick because man, this one just murders me. Hang on a second. This happens later on, and it's Letha has been hurt somehow, and why am I blanking on her husband's name?
Banner Thompson. Thompson.
Banner's like holding her hand or something like that.
Yeah, so she's been injured. She's been injured in the fight with Dark Mill South. Her jaw is open now and hanging down. So they've got her back in the sheriff's office, up on a table, and Armitage is trying to triage her and Banner to apply some first aid. Yeah, Banner's holding her hands.
Yeah,
and there is a wonderful moment there.
Oh my God, this is like a testament to Jones knowing how to say things in so few words that make you know exactly what he's talking about. The quote I have is, Deputy Tompkins holds his wife's hand in his, trying, Hardy knows, to siphon her pain away, take it on himself. It's a maneuver widowers know well.
Yes.
Fuck, dude. That. I remember like the moment I read that this time around, like it took me back to the first time I read that and how I had to literally put the book down because it was so impactful. And like, I feel like because My Heart is a Chainsaw was so much building and learning and like world building and learning these characters and everything, we didn't get, and all from Jade's perspective, we didn't see how the other characters were. And like that right there, man, is one of like the greatest like moments for me, because we got to see really quickly like the pain and the love and like the impact of what happens in a person's life, for someone who's not Jade. And I thought that was a really good moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this, I'm looking for it right now. There's this wonderful moment with uh, where the little girl Adrian climbs up in Hardy's lap and is just sitting there in his lap, and he's as injured as he is, and as slow as he is. He's having to get around on a walker. He's still a man of action. Banner's he's like the highest ranking person in there officially, and he's in over his head.
Yeah.
And so Hardy wants to, just kind of leap into action and help lead this crew. And then this little girl's in his lap, and he's just kind of chills for a minute and lets her play with the fur on his sable hat. And he just remembers being, when his daughter Melanie was that age. It's a wonderful moment there.
I think this is part of that too. I have a quote. I have a list of sweet moments quotes. Maybe this summer he'll even take her. Maybe this summer he'll even take this one out to it, hike her up on it so she can see out across the lake, and she'll point to the other shore, like this old man living here his whole life can't have even seen it yet.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Oh man, so sweet, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of heart, I think, in this from other perspectives than just Jade, which I thought was a very effective thing to heart, but also just like the ability to develop characters not through the Jade lens, like seeing Letha for the first time from Letha's perspective and seeing Banner Tompkins from Banner Tompkins' perspective and stuff, I think was really, really cool too, as far as like building our investment in these other characters that aren't Jade.
Yeah, and just getting a closer look at the other characters in this story, like the victims mostly. We get to kind of see what stuff looks like through their eyes and their actions. We're kind of actually directly with the teens in a lot of those moments this time, and getting their internal thoughts. And yeah, sometimes it's, I'm never going to be this 18 again, and then sometimes it's well, that's never going to happen.
It does a couple of things. One, that more, it's not episodic, but it is, having so many more POVs represented, it helps to flesh out the entire community. And I think especially by the time you get to the Angel of Indian Lake, you'll see that it's not just the story about Jade. It really is the story of Proof Rock. Yeah. And in particular, it's Jade's place in Proof Rock, because she's always this outsider character. She comes back in. She's still an outsider, though I think people understand a little bit better how much they need her by the time we get to Don't Fear the Reaper. And that theme continues on, and what's her place here. But you are seeing an entire community. There are, and you could take moments out of this, like the chapter that's just about Kimmy, Jade's mom, who left her. She's a very flawed, very broken character. She left Tab, I think, because he's so abusive, but she left her daughter there with him, and you get a good sense of what's going on with her internally, and then that amazing moment when, like, she's the only person here in the Dollar General or the Family Dollar store, and no one's going to be coming in. Everything's frozen over. They're getting power into the store from a generator back behind the building, and it's just enough to have a few lights on and the cash register, and that's it. And she's just going through this very, it's very like somber reverie on what it's like to be one of the guards at the
Queen's Guards,
Buckingham Palace or the Tower of London or whatever. One of the guards with the tall sable hats, and it's really kind of morose. And then the best thing she can do is not think too much about the sad state of her life, how things have turned out for her. And then Jade walks in, and it's like we're able to take the first breath of clean, fresh air with the windows of the car rolled down. You're able to take a breath for a moment. It's quite a startling change from the dour nature of her internal monologue to the moment Jade walks in. And it's like suddenly her little girl, her little 6-year-old girl, her 10-year-old girl is back there again. You could take just that one section and go and publish that as a short story. You wouldn't have to change much to give it a little bit of context either. So yeah, and I've seen plenty of other people comment on, wow, like you really get a sense of, not that Kimmy is like suddenly a good person, but you understand her better. Or maybe if you're going to judge her for being a disengaged, estranged mother for Jade, which is not a good thing, at least you understand her better, why she did what she did, and especially how she's having to live with the guilt of it, and the just kind of the darkness of her life as it is now.
Yeah, it's almost like she's trying to impose a prison sentence on herself in a way. It's kind of the feeling I got from it, and like I feel like he did a good job with that character because if you're a parent and you know for a fact that you failed your child in the worst way, you're going to think, I don't deserve to be in this person's life. I don't deserve to talk to them. I don't deserve to XYZ. I'm assuming. I'm not a parent, so like I can't say, but like that's the feeling I got from reading this, and so like it does feel like she's like, I deserve the misery. I deserve this feeling. I deserve the monotony of my kind of pointless life. And the only thing that makes me happy is the thought that like she's going to be okay or something like that. So yeah, it was a very poignant thing to see her perspective and to see her, like what she's going through and how like it seems like everything is kind of focused on her daughter. Like her whole world is just like narrowed down to that pinpoint of like, this is the only thing that matters. And I fucked that up. And so like, yeah, it was a very strong moment. So like her death later on was pretty crazy too, because it's like, oh, you know what? Outside of the only thing that she's even thinking of, like she's been a problem before. And like, so it zooms out a little bit to like her other kind of troubles in life too with, we find out that white elk is essentially the kind of revenge manifestation for Sheriff Hardy's daughter.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really great. Because at the beginning of the book, that white elk, Jade gets back in town. She goes up, but the first person she sees is Hardy. She fucking hugs him. I cried. It was very good.
Oh yeah. It's a great moment.
Oh my God. Like, because like you're seeing real emotion from Jade where she was so like guarded before, like seeing real emotion from Jade is like, just destroys me. And they have this beautiful moment and he's like, he like makes her, hey, look. And then they see this white elk and he mistakenly says like, it's here for you, not realizing what the white elk actually was. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I think, I guess that white elk is, a spiritual kind of figure. He says it's come down now. It's come down and making a rare appearance for her. And I think I guess eats the Melanie blob that's come up kind of like pond scum up to the top of the water and has become possessed with her vengeful spirit. I think I look at that and think there's some like Friday the 13th influence going on there with kind of Jason coming, well, in a way you've got Hardy in My Heart is a Chainsaw, who has tied the boat up to the dock unbeknownst to the boat driver, and they've started off the propeller and it kills Cleat. So Hardy has gotten revenge, and that's sort of a Mrs. Voorhees kind of moment there. And then we've got his daughter, the one who was the child who was wronged, like Jason, coming back from the dead to take revenge as well, in a very mysterious way. So you definitely have your definitely lean into supernatural elements there. But yeah, that is a part of the broader picture. And yeah, Kimmy still has, I guess, in the eyes of the supernatural killer here, Kimmy has another transgression yet to pay for.
And that's a Velvet Buzzsaw. Did you ever see the movie Velvet Buzzsaw?
Yeah,
that's with Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Yeah. So the thing I love about that is because it's basically a very clear-cut transgression punishment kind of horror story. Even though Jake Gyllenhaal at some point figures out what's wrong, like the error, he figures out why this is happening, and he like changes his tune. He already transgressed. And so there's no coming back from it. So like, even though maybe the current version of that person didn't necessarily deserve the punishment, they transgressed, and it's just got to be done. So I that was one of my favorite things about that movie was how even the person who figured it out and like feels bad and repents or whatever you want to say, tries to stop other people from doing the thing, still gets punished because they did it too. So I feel like there's kind of some elements of that in Kimmy's story. Like, she was part of it all those years ago, and the only thing that matters to that kid that died is, what happened in that moment.
Yeah, why didn't you come and help? Why did you guys not do something to try to rescue her when she was drowning? Yeah, there's a little darker kind of universal revenge kind of thing going on there.
But that ties into a strong feeling I got probably midway to maybe 2/3 of the way through this book, which was like laying the grounds for the idea that the lake was causing things. The lake was causing things to happen. So like, like obviously with like Stacey Graves and everything in the original book, but now other things are coming out ostensibly from the lake, like the whole Melanie thing with the white elk and everything. The lake feels like it's the problem, like it's the source of it's a corruption. And so I don't know if there's a thought to just that, but
there definitely is, yeah.
So like, because I want to go into another part of the conversation, which is like the lake should never have been, and like the whole Ezekiel thing. So do you guys have any thoughts about like the idea of the lake being the source of the corruption and the problems before we go into Ezekiel and all that?
Let me say that I feel like in My Heart is a Chainsaw, Terra Nova, the fact that these wealthy people are coming in, taking part of a national park, national forest, and cutting out a little swath of that just for themselves, to have the most to have the best view you could have anywhere in America. That's colonization. They're taking on colonization.
Yep.
And it's not that in here those who are being wronged are not indigenous people. Certainly not exclusively that. It's the folks of Proof Rock. But the analogy is here are these wealthy, powerful people coming in and doing what they want, even taking a part of a national forest, which no one is supposed to do, but they're wealthy and powerful and they can do whatever they want. So you have the colonizing going on here. And part of that colonial effort there is industry, right? I mean, they're trying to, this is a silver mine here that the town is built around. So it is that trying to change nature, exploit nature for the enrichment of this company, the Golding. What's the name of the company? Golding.
Harding or something like that, or no?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I got that way wrong. I'm sorry.
Henderson Golding.
Henderson
Golding.
There's an H involved.
Yeah. The two guys, Henderson and Golding.
Harding Golding.
Yeah, who create this mine here, and then one ends up killing the other, and it's all a big mess. But yeah, they flood they flood that area. They change it forever, and in a way that draws more people there. So it is this industrial colonization effort that takes place, and they have forever changed what this valley its topography, its makeup, probably pushing indigenous people out of the area. Um, but the
Literally
folks
pushing
who
the
are
indigenous
drawn
people
there
out of the area.
also. What's that?
Literally pushing the indigenous people out of the area.
Yeah, yeah. And then along with the colonists comes of course you know folks from the Christian tradition who have a start a church there, and then they find this guy Ezekiel. They don't even, I don't think he even has a last name, but they find this guy who's kind of basically crazed. No one knows where he comes from. He's kind of a crazed person when they find him, but he ends up becoming this hellfire and brimstone preacher who uses his Bible like a gavel. Is the description there? Who forms this church and is a real like kind of fanatical zealot type, and that kicks off a whole new wave of I think tragedy for the area.
Yeah, it creates the separation between Stacy and her mom. I'm assuming it kind of perpetrates the way that Stacy was mistreated by the town. Like it just creates like a pattern of misery, like kind of perpetuated forward. Yeah.
Yeah, Stacy was. I think that the description is something like she's like was abandoned by when she separated from her family. She ends up kind of being treated like a feral cat.
Yeah.
She's like just kind of picking food out of trash cans or whatever, out of the garbage that's thrown away out behind people's houses, and no one is taking her into their home. No one is, for within the Christian tradition, hospitality is a big deal, especially early on in many centuries ago. Hospitality is one of the key things. Like if there's a poor person, if there's a person who is homeless, the Christian community should be taking care of them. And while there's a church here and people who would identify as Christian, they're letting a child live outdoors and go hungry. So that's a real condemnation of the people who live here. How much of their religion is simply lip service and whatever else they're going to get out of it. They're not doing what they should be doing in terms of the most vulnerable people, and like that ought to be the one thing that identifies them as good religious folk, and they have left that out. What is in its place is this. Even after the valley floods, Ezekiel and his faithful flock stay in their church building. They want no part of the changes here. They're going to stay in here in their building and keep singing, even as water laps at the doors and the walls of the church. And they apparently just kind of die down there as the valley is inundated. And there's more than one person who kind of hear, and Jade is one of them, as I recall. They hear this sound, that the eerie sound of the voices down in Drowned Town, Ezekiel's cold box. They still hear the sound of his faithful, his followers singing down there in the church. There's also this wonderful image when you get into the POV section where Melanie is describing what it's like to be down there with the kind of the ghost of this little boy Silas, and you have this view of all the animal. You go certain depth down there, you've got the animals that are kind of suspended down there in the cold water. Elk, deer, some moose, and then even below that are the humans. And there's this image of them all down there with their arms kind of raised, like they're in praise, or raised looking up to the surface, hoping to get down there, but their eyes and mouths are all open, and it's just suspended down there in the cold. It's so cold that the normal processes of decomposition that would fill their abdomens with gas and let them float to the surface are not working. That's why we've got missing people like Tap Daniels and the young man, the Swede at the beginning. who's never found. So it's a very, very creepy image down there, quite haunting. It'd be beautiful for a film or TV adaptation, and that would be a scene to shoot right there. There's that sort. That's the reason why Stacy, who's at least part Indian, part native, she can't go down under the water because that is a Christian burial ground. It's Stephen playing with the trope of magic and kind of evil supernatural things happen because you built over an Indian graveyard, or you buried your pet in an Indian graveyard. And it's Stephen turning that around and say, well, what would happen if it were a Christian graveyard for an indigenous girl? That's not good. Her non-Christian soul can't go down there into Drowned Town with Ezekiel's cold box. So she bounces off the water. That's kind of the idea there. So it's in this case, the church is a source of menace and eeriness for the town, and that'll get explored more in the third book as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to call out that the contrast between Ezekiel and his lot and anybody who kind of does like the colonizer thing. So like the founders in Terra Nova are kind of an analogy for that colonizer type of thing, like you said earlier. But Ezekiel and his lot and everything are just taking and possessing and making a thing their own. And I think the theme around the other side, the indigenous side, the Native American side, is they just want things to be the way they were. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of exemplified in Stacy. The only time Stacy does anything bad is when someone disturbs her from her rest or from wanting to be with her mother.
Yes.
She's not going after people for being colonized and doing the bad thing and changing things. She just wants to not be disturbed. And the only time she reacts is when she's disturbed. And I feel like that's the whole thing with that side of it, the Native American side of it, is they just want things to be the way they're supposed to be. And then, when the lake is made, they just kind of move on to another thing. And the people who are there are left to kind of like suffer through the effects of what's going on with like first Ezekiel and then like what happens in Terra Nova and stuff like that as well. It kind of maybe went off on a tangent there, but like there's a real stark contrast of like good people aren't showing an equivalent aggression to what the bad people are doing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There isn't an adversarial response from the indigenous community. They do. I think you have a moment where Tab at least claimed at one point, of course he's a drunk and a blowhard, but he claims to have seen real bow and arrow Indians, I think is how he puts it. His ancestors kind of up on the edge of the lake on their painted horses, and he's having this vision of the people of his ancestors, his people.
Yep.
And he identifies, but they kind of move on, and we don't. Yeah. Once the prospectors come into this area, the presence of the indigenous people is in the handful who remain, and there are still folks like Tab and a few others who are of Native American ancestry who stay here, but it's they're the ethnic minority at this point.
Yep. Tapping into, because this is one of the most badass things in the whole book, tapping into the whole like colonizer theme and the way that Jones just kind of like expresses it so fucking well is there's a moment where I think Letha and Jade are on the Terra Nova side, maybe, and they're talking. It's like after a confrontation, either before or after a confrontation with Dark Mill South. And here's the quote I have. She opens her hand to snow-shrouded Proof Rock. "It is quaint, isn't it?" Letha says, draping herself draping herself over to study the town. I can see what Mr. Samuels saw. I mean, same thing Columbus saw from his ship. Letha looks over for explanation. Something that wasn't his. Jennifer clears right up.
Yeah.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Like that's all you need. That mic drop. Don't need to say more than that.
It's a sobering line, no doubt.
Something that wasn't his.
I kind of feel like again in Chainsaw you have this picture of colonizers, and then in Reaper there's another distinct picture, and that's Armitage, who's Claude Armitage, who's a very interesting figure because he's the horror fan. He's in a lot of ways he's what Jade was. In fact, there's this wonderful moment where you see how Jade has really changed over time, and I think that's one of the important things about making putting Reaper 4 years after Chainsaw, which is like she's 22, Jade's 22 now. She's a changed person, right? In a lot of ways, she doesn't remember doesn't remember all the slasher trivia, but when Armitage meets Jade and Letha out on the ice, and Letha has been grievously injured, and he's there. He runs into them completely surprised, and he's assisting. He's helping carry Letha back over to Prufrock. But he's so jubilant now because we all know why he's really there. He's writing a book, or he's also an enormous fan of slashers. But he's doing research for a book. He's going to take part of this experience and really like the tragedy that's happened here and make it his own, and he's going to profit off of it in book sales, or he's going to raise his status, raise his profile by being
a star fucker.
Finally got the story on this, but he can't help but spout all
with him.
yeah. He can't help but spout all these slasher facts and whatever. And then Jade, you kind of get from her point of view, to punctuate it. Really send his point home, Armitage steps forward and raises his fist in the sky for a silhouette moment, a celebration of victory, diversity, and unification over fragmentation and othering. Don't you forget about me. He's doing a little Breakfast Club thing there. But all Jade can think in her current flatline state is, was she ever this annoying? How did anybody even tolerate being around her? Wonderful moment. Yes, here's Armitage being kind of like what Jade was like, but he's and there's also maybe some hints that he's possibly behind some of these murders. When Hardy first sees him out on the ice and runs into him, he's got blood on one of his gloves. Like what's going on there? And there's something going on between him and Cinnamon, a student. There's he's a very questionable guy. But I think this is kind of the cultural appropriation moment here, where again it's not him really doing cultural appropriation of indigenous. Again, that would be the kind of the what the analogy is maybe pointing toward. But what he's doing is trying to appropriate the suffering that this town has gone through in the Independence Day massacre. It's not his pain, but he's going to try to basically build himself up, maybe enrich himself. And maybe even the least ignoble is he wants to, in some way, be part of it. But that's kind of a sick urge. Like, no, people died here. This was horrific, and he's literally. There's a moment it's just in passing, but he's getting off on being part of this. So here, the hardcore horror fan is really pictured as kind of a sick guy. But I think there's probably some, a comment on cultural appropriation here by analogy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And reinforce that he's just like not a good person because of all the creepy shit that comes out with like you said about him and inappropriate things with Cinnamon and stuff like that. Like, it is established that, but like he's also a good, red herring for. Is he one of the people that's causing some of the killings that are happening in the movie or in the book? It's a book.
For now,
it does feel very cinematic. But even as bad a person as Armitage is, there is a moment where you it doesn't condone his behavior or his character, but we see kind of why he is the way he is, or you have a moment where it describes him butting heads with his dad as a teenager, and his dad unspooling all of his VHS slasher films, and in kind of it is revenge. Young Claude Armitage melts down all his dad's vinyl albums and stuff. That's at least a point where I think a lot of horror fans who tend to be outsiders will get it. Like, not their school, their social circle at school, or their parents, or their whatever, the good folks of their communities don't understand why are you into so much dark stuff? Why do you watch those movies? Why do you read those books? And there's probably a little bit of a connection there. At least that kind of resonates with me as maybe the black sheep of my school circle, or whatever. So there's, even though he's painted as a creep, there are some ways in which you kind of connect with him. And another character, Rexall, who is a bad person. He is a pedophile. He's videotaping girls and getting changed in the locker rooms. Then he's been doing that since Chainsaw. We know that very well. There's a wonderful moment where you see how badly he misses Tab Daniels. Tab Daniels, who's a terrible person as well. Yep. But he's even, while he's got these cameras all set up, Rexall has these cameras set up in the girls' changing room, probably in the locker room, in the bathrooms and stuff. To be able to, record girls changing out of their clothes. It's just disgusting. But he's also got a camera set up to watch the lake, because he has this sense that Tab Daniels is going to come back up. His body hasn't bobbed up out of the lake yet, but at some point he's going to come back. And he wants to make sure that, he says Tab's memory will probably be like erased or backed up to when he was a little child. So where would he go? Probably to homeroom, where they were kids together in elementary school, and that's in the high school now. And so he's got cameras set up to watch in case Tab comes back. He misses Tab so much, and it's a wonderfully human moment for one of the characters who is really one of the most despicable characters in the entire town. I mean, I think it says something to Stephen's desire to create truly human characters, where you can not sympathize, but understand, or in some way connect with even the most awful characters in his stories.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. There's two ways I want to go now, and I'm going to go with.
You want to talk about Tupac, don't you?
No, I'm going to save that. I'm saving that for the next deep dive. We're going to talk about Tupac big in the next deep dive for sure.
Okay. I couldn't name a single Tupac song, so I am very eager to hear what you guys have to say about him. I guess Mama, something like that, or
there's that California Love song that
Shorty going to be a thug.
I was always a Biggie guy, so I can't.
Yeah, no,
I can't speak intelligently about Tupac, but maybe I will before our next deep dive. I'll just do a lot of Tupac listening.
You're gonna have to, clue me in there. I do take it he was murdered in Las Vegas, and that's why Rexall wants to go there. So,
what a weird character. So, there's a couple of things I want to talk about slasher rules and like the slasher rules that have come up in this book. But before we do that, I want to touch on a couple of things because Tab Daniels came up. There was a moment in the book where Tab Daniels was talking about how Indians never die. So I'm going to read that quote really quick because it's from Rexall's perspective. So that's one of the reasons I want to go into this. What Tab told him after his Big Rex senior year was that Indians never really die. That you can tell that by how he was still alive there when the Grand Prix should have killed his ass. You can tell by how there's still Indians everywhere after the cavalry has been trying to kill them ever since Columbus, ever since the Vikings, ever since that cold, windy walk across from Russia even. And like, that's another thing. Like you were saying with Rexall, he's building good real human characteristics into someone who we know sucks.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good point from someone who is just a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But
I remember reading a piece of literary criticism about John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. And the criticism was The Grapes of Wrath could have been a great it's a good American novel, could have been a great American novel, except for the adversaries, basically everyone who is up against the folks coming in from Oklahoma. The adversaries, the enemies were all like just two-dimensional people who just hated on Okies. He hated the Oklahoman folks coming out of the Dust Bowl trying to find any work so that they could survive. So yeah, flat, and that just stuck with me. I mean, that was like I read that in like probably 11th grade. That was a long time ago. But the flatness of villains is not a good thing. And so when I see Stephen creating, weaving in very human elements in the worst of his humans. Of his human characters. I take note. I think, like, you don't have to do that. People will just accept that Rexall's a bad person, that Tab's a bad person. But there's a difference. Well, even in Dark Mill South, you have hints, and then you have a moment at the very end where you kind of get a sense of why he is the way he is, and it's because even he suffered abuse at the hands of grown-ups who should have taken care of him, and they didn't.
That was not lost on me too. They planted the seed with is it Galetta? Is that how you say her name?
Galatea.
Galatea. Sorry, Galatea
Yeah.
was the one who was writing she took the interludes this time around. So Jade was writing her extra credit in My Heart is a Chainsaw. It wasn't it Galatea who was writing her history stuff for Armitage, which I'm saying Armitage because that's how I heard Steven say it in an interview.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
She was the one who was writing that stuff this time around, right? Those little like kind of interspersed historical things, right? Yeah. I forgot what I was saying, but
well, I mean, it also like I think I'm just gonna guess in Galatea's papers, which also ties back into the theory of the lake and colonization and all that alone too, is just you have indigenous people and you have the Native American children who are kidnapped from their homes and put in religious schools.
Yes. Yep.
Which might have something to do with Ezekiel and the lake being a source of. I mean, there's a lot of evil sources going on in Proof Rock. It seems like like every corner they turn, there's something else they got to face down. But I don't know. Was that what you had in mind? Was
her speculation that based on the research that she had done, that Dark Mill South was one of the abducted Native American kids who was raised in like a Catholic orphanage or whatever, where they were trying to kind of strip the native out of them. And that was one of the reasons that he ended up being, he was abused and everything like that. Yeah. That whole thing.
Yeah. It's, there's some documentation Galatea found that, he had been put in the Morris Industrial School for Indians, which like many such boarding schools run by religious concerns. In this case, the Sisters of Mercy, Catholic. Conditions were, as was common then, regrettable, often punitive, hardly America's proudest moment.
Yeah, and there was like a real awful quote that was something like "kill the Indian, save the child" or something like that. Like really bad. Like what they were trying to do was just obliterate the actual culture of the people in order to kind of, in their eyes, redeem the actual human body or whatever it is. Like it's sick and it's ridiculous and like we don't have to understand it because it's awful. Like that whole thing comes back around with when Dark Mill South is eventually killed by Jade at the end of the book with the pokey, the trash poker.
Yeah.
He says that prayer in Latin. He says that Latin prayer, which is it's the Our Father, right? Isn't that what he does?
Yeah. He says the first line, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be." No, just "Our Father who art in heaven" is as far as he gets, and he dies. And him whispering, that's his rosebud moment, right? Where we kind of get a sense of what it is that's been driving him. and there's just like this picture of him being again, Galatea is trying to figure it out. Did uh, he get dialed back to being a scared little boy? But you get the sense of him, having suffered punitive abuse. I think they mentioned, specifically, like if these Indian children speak their native tongues, then they get punished. Like
Yep.
you talk about cultural
Obliteration, really.
Obliteration. Then don't let them speak their language. Don't let them practice their kind of native religious, traditions. Their kind of religious expression. Don't let them do any of those things. So there's physical and sexual abuse, but there's also this. There are some elements there. So this guy was, let's say, severely abused by these religious schools as a child, and so that helped turn him into a monster. Well, there's also this connection. At least Galatea thinks that, one theory is that he's also trying to get revenge for the 38 Dakota men who were hanged in the largest mass hanging in I think it was 1862, I believe. And so he's starting to number the victims after around 31, 32.
Yep.
He's starting to number them. So maybe he's getting revenge for what was done to these Dakota men. And then there's also this weird hint that the birth certificate that they found was from like 1912, which would make Dark Mill South, and it was like DM South was the name on it. If that's this guy, Dark Mill South, that'd make him like 107 years old. So maybe there's something about that ethnicity that lets him live much longer, but like 107, and he's this unstoppable mass. Now, I think Stephen's playing with these elements that are really on the verge of supernatural, because he's trying to, he made Dark Mill South because he couldn't use Jason from Friday the 13th in Proofrock. His editor told him no, or his agent told him no. You'll get sued for that, so don't do that. So he created a character I think is a lot more compelling than Jason. This Dark Mill South with all these possible threads that might point to the truth about him, but I don't think you ever really get a good sense of, like, really how old is he, or which of these different threads is accurate. But it does seem like abuse at the hands of a school intended to beat the Indian out of him was definitely part of it. And it does seem like it had a Catholic nature to it because of that the prayer he starts to utter at the end. Yeah.
So, but so that comes back around to the idea of excellent fucking storytelling, because Jones doesn't straight up tell you what's going on with Dark Mill South. He gives you a bunch of thoughts and lets you kind of like put them together in the way that your mind is receptive to, kind of, in a way. There's so many things that it could be, and there's this thing in front of you, and it's up to you as the reader to kind of build the bad guy that makes sense to you. And I think that's just excellent fucking storytelling. That's horror storytelling. That's like, put your fears in this person. Like, I've given you a general idea of what could be going on, and it's up to you to like interpret what that means. And I think that's an effective way of creating a character. You build in enough, not necessarily ambiguity, but you build in enough like wiggle room where the reader fills it in with what's the scariest version of that thing, and kind of, in a way.
Yeah. There's one character or one film that's referred to here that I think connects with that idea of putting your fears on this, maybe somewhat of a blank canvas of a monster or villain. Of course, we know references to Friday the 13th, or but we kind of know what's motivating that. This kid was allowed to drown, and the counselors didn't help him out, so he's coming back for revenge. Oh wait, no, it's his mom who's really getting revenge. Well, but later, no, it's him. He's come back supernaturally. So we kind of understand what's going on there, or someone who's wronged in some way. We get it. But the movie It Follows is referenced in here, and that's a good one where like you can't see the force that's coming to get you, the monster's coming to get you. You don't know. You maybe have some hints as to why it's targeting you, but why it's targeting people at all, you don't know. You don't understand its motivation. You can't see it coming. All you can see is the effect of it, and that is really scary. And here you've got Dark Mill South, who is this unstoppable force, and he is so we have details about him. We've seen even some photos of him, but we know he's been in the prison system. There are some records about him, but his origins are so shrouded in mystery. And his motive there. Why is he killing all these people? Is he simply a sociopath? And then there are hints as to what the motivation might be. But there's a lot of mystery around that. And the unstoppable force is just terrifying. It's like the Terminator. Yeah. Well, here with the Terminator, we know why. We know what his motivation is. It's kill this person so that we win the fight in the future. But DMS, man, what's motivating the killings? And then, of course, the confusion of who exactly is he killing in the story versus other players, one in particular, who really is behind a whole lot of the deaths. Dark Mill South ends up not being the killer of a whole lot of folks who you assume he is killing at first, or who the general public thinks he's murdered.
All right. I want to talk about something that came up, and we'll see how this goes, because like this is something that I have noticed, obviously in the first book, but also in this one, is like when slasher rules kind of get dropped as part of like just common knowledge or knowledge from our characters, and I think because maybe it jumped out to me more this time because it's not just Jade talking about slasher rules, but like there's other people too. Reflecting on the slasher stuff. So, Jade obviously, but then like anybody else, like Letha has some thoughts on slasher stuff, and Galatea when there's like those kind of other kind of interstitial moments and stuff like that. I love it when little like slasher rules get dropped into the books that these books, but there's also just some like badass moments. And the first one I think is pretty early in the book. I think it's like the first time it's like it's Galatea talking about Dark Mill South, and something about I think that she was talking about how when they were transporting Dark Mill South to go to the points of places where he had left bodies behind, that initial kind of why he's out on the road before the storm brings him to Proof Rock thing. The idea that there was a law enforcement officer who was there behind him, just ready to put a bullet in his head if something goes wrong. And just really quick, the whole quote is, "If indeed a bullet would even be sufficient."
Yeah.
And that is one of the things I love the most about kind of building the mythology of a slasher, of like a bad guy like this, is and it comes up later on where
well, isn't that too in that, is that the passage where everyone's already facing north just because that's the way they're heading? So he doesn't even have to position his kills here. Like
they're doing it for him.
They're already set. He just has to kill him is all.
Yeah. All he has to do is kill him. But there was another thing, I think, I don't know if I have the quote copied anywhere, but there was another thing where it was like something that would usually slow someone down, like an injury of some kind, because Dark Mill South is the killer that he is, would actually make him go faster. And I love shit like that, where it's like the legend of a killer is that like a normal bodily injury feeds into what they are and makes them more what they are. And I love that stuff. And there was several instances of that in the book that I thought were just such good, like myth making or something, because even if it's just in the mind of the person who's scared, that makes it real enough that you have to consider, is it really how it is or not? Like, the fear of the people who are facing this person kind of builds a mythology too. And even if this person is just totally normal and human, it makes you pause and think, are they? And I love that type of like myth building and stuff of bad guys.
It becomes really important when I think it's Jade and Armitage are kind of going back and forth. I think maybe Cinnamon's part of that conversation as well, where they're like at the sheriff's office and working, trying to save Letha's life or do some limit the damage there, and they're going back and forth about how to take on Darkmill South. And it's like, well, so-and-so has a gun. Yeah, but, well, we know that doesn't work. And they kind of move on to the next. Well, we've got to position Cinnamon in here. She's the final. They're thinking Cinnamon's the final girl here. So Cinnamon's the one he's coming after. Well, the problem with, if Cinnamon just keeps moving, well, that's what we ought to do. If she stays here at the sheriff's office, then she's kind of got backed into a corner and Darkness Law's going to find her here and kill her. So she's got to keep moving. Yeah, let her do that. Well, but when she does, when the final girl keeps moving, then that's when the killer goes around and is killing everyone around on her trajectory. Okay, so it'd be better to keep her here. And they're all like with Armitage, they're actually have some common language here. They have a common understanding of how slasher rules, how the slasher works. And it's just interesting to have someone that's not Jade and not Letha able to speak that language. And boy, immediately, like they're able to converse and have this weird logic, kind of this weird tribal logic between the two or three of them that Hardy's just like sitting here scratching his head wondering, what are that? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's pretty a fascinating and really pretty hilarious moment there.
Which leads me to another quote. But then I want to talk about the idea of slashers Jade didn't get to see while she was incarcerated.
Yeah.
But there's a quote that I fucking loved so much. Just please let it be Letha who squares off against this particular fox in the hen house, not Banner. All he's got are bullets and authority, neither of which have currency in a slasher.
Yep.
That's fucking so good. Like, everything that makes sense in a normal person's life does not help in this situation. And I fucking love that. And it's so true. Like, it plays out that way. And it's so good.
Can I share another line that I think comments in a way on what you just said? Would that be okay? It's on page 302 of the Saga Press edition here. So Jade I think this is where they are escaping, trying to escape. Letha has been injured, her jaw's hanging down. They're trying to escape Terra Nova and get back over to Proof Rock. And she has gotten, Jade has gotten out of like the snow gear and has zipped up into the coveralls. And I think is even getting, comes up with her eyeliner. There's no time for it, but it's armor, she says. And then it notes down below, it's if that's, let me see, her finding some coveralls to wear is just the same as talking about eye makeup and stuff. The warmth they provide doesn't have anything to do with heat, but with story. It's the strength that they have. It's like they're weaponizing a narrative that's enabling them to defend themselves. I think in an important, in a crucial way for them to stay alive. It's really interesting. He pulls that in. There's another moment I thought was really pretty hilarious, which is where Armitage is. I think this is where he is doing his ice skating on skis around, dressed up like the killer from Curtains, carrying around the scythe or whatever and cutting off mannequin heads and stuff. And he's thinking about how the events as are happening up to this point are likely to go a certain direction. And I think he's correct about some of these things. So he's a really rotten guy, but he's probably the character who has his eye most on Stephen Graham Jones. He is seeing what Stephen is doing with his narrative. So this really rotten guy kind of is the closest one looking at kind of to seeing God pulling the strings here over this story. It's really interesting. The story that they're in gets really close to the characters themselves at a couple points. And that moment there that I just read with Jade, realizing that the coveralls that look, her old mechanics coveralls, and they are all grungy and worn down or whatever, but it makes her look like Michael Myers. And her strength is coming from being part of the story, the slasher narratives, the slasher kind of universe. It is empowering for her. So again, it's just one more way in which she's becoming the teenage Jade again.
Mm-hmm. All right, I found the other slasher kind of rule quote that I was mentioning a minute ago. All right, Jade rolls around fast, desperate, and Dark Mill South is stepping out the gone window, an angry red slash seeping across his chest, but not slowing him down, probably making him faster even. That's how it is with slashers. Fuck, that's so good. It's so good. Ugh. Like, she knows, like, him getting injured just makes him more of what he needs to be. It's like fuel to him.
Yes.
And it's so good because it's just like that mythology of, but it serves her to try and to not underestimate, an injury means that I'm in a better position. To her, it means, now he's been injured. This is even more dangerous. And I think that's fantastic. It's really good. It's so good.
It defies the laws of physics, totally works within the laws of slashers.
Yep.
The opposite is kind of true too. On the flip side of the coin, then every injury to a slasher makes them that much more slashery and stronger and faster. But you kind of think of it too. Then each successive person the slasher murders is fuel for the final girl to become the final girl and to take them down too.
Yeah, because he's killing, probably a good number of people that the final girl really cares about. Her friends, her parents, a teacher, that sort of thing, a beloved teacher. And it pushes her further and further to this moment of transformation she has to go through to come out on the other side and take out the...
It's like the killing of the humanity. Like, the murder is the necessary step for the transformation to happen. So it's just a vicious cycle from all directions and all sides too. Like, this has to happen for this other thing to happen. And then you're just left with all the bodies on the floor.
Yeah.
And I love that there has to be some sort of balance to everything. Like, that there is something that's causing everything to somehow balance out in the end. Like, there was transgression, which allowed the slasher to happen. But when the slasher goes too far, there's the final girl to, like, counterbalance what's going on. It's such a cool equation because it's really just like action, reaction, cause and effect, like that kind of thing. It's really cool.
Yeah. The universe has to have both a killer to clean the slate for some transgression, some injustice that's been done.
Yep.
And then the final girl to stop the cycle from going any further because there's been enough bloodshed.
Yep.
It's balanced out the wrong. And now the killer, who's maybe in some way a pawn of the universe's balancing act, can't go any further. Has to be, poor slasher, poor killer, or the universe is using the malice in the heart of the killer. If it's there, may as well use it for some purpose that is in some way a kind of a dark justice or whatever.
Little murder, okay. A lot of murder, no, we got to stop that.
No, I mean, once it gets to that point, you got to shut it down. Right? Yeah. And even the final girl there, in that sense, I suppose, is a pawn because we're going to have to traumatize her so much, see enough of her friends and her parents and her mentors and her teachers and whatever get killed until and chase her around, terrify her until she becomes transformed. So it is a dark justice indeed.
Which is like my second favorite movie reference in the book, although this one's a direct quote, because it made me, what you were saying kind of made me think that, well, we work with what we have. You know, which Cabin in the Woods. Although my all-time favorite movie reference in this whole book isn't even a horror movie. He references Train Spotting, and I just love that so much. That it's like my two worlds meeting up with each other.
Totally. Yes.
I personally know your love for Irvine Welsh, Jesse, from knowing you as a person. So yes, absolutely. So one thing really quick I want to touch on is the idea that Jones used the fact that Jade had been incarcerated for several years to put a twist in the story where there was a slasher mechanism in the book that she didn't understand. And that is the cupcakes from Happy Death Day, and that being the method of murder, a poison cupcake that she didn't understand. So when there was like the whole video store scene with all the high school kids and stuff, and like the cupcakes being poisoned, and then like they're vomiting all over the place and all that kind of stuff, being a mechanism of a slasher story she didn't understand, I thought that was fantastic, because not only is he being realistic about the fact that like she was incarcerated for a while, but also he used that to his advantage to draw confusion into the story, like to make the story less clear, at least for Jade. Even if we, as people who have seen Happy Death Day, knew what was going on, I thought that was a really cool way of using time, kind of against Jade, like the time that she was serving in prison.
She didn't get to do her homework for 4 years. I mean, and now Letha is finally caught up. They're all watching these as instruction manuals, as survival guides. And Jade didn't get to do that for 4 solid years. There's a lot of survival she doesn't know about now.
Yeah. And she's really like out of prison and comes straight back to Proof Rock. She's had no time to, I guess get a Netflix account and catch up, and doesn't appear to have any interest in doing that at the beginning. But it puts her at a disadvantage. It's a way to ratchet up the threat against her.
Yep. Which I thought was cool. I thought that was a great way to kind of like honor the timing of everything, but also like give a nod to stuff, that is more recent and everything. But kind of like zooming out, because we're getting close to the amount of time that we have. The one thing we haven't really talked a lot about is Cinnamon Baker and her kind of contribution and role in the whole thing. And so we are left to kind of piece some things together in our head and everything, but the general knowledge is that like Cinnamon is behind the killings that are themed to slasher films. So like she's behind the initial kills in the beginning of the movie, and like she's behind a good amount of the kills that happen throughout the story as well. And her whole revenge arc is obviously like her own personal story of what happened on the boat and everything in My Heart is a Chainsaw. And I struggled with kind of knowing what that was, because there was kind of like Ginger herself was a little bit of a red herring as being like the crazy one who like had to try and survive in the forest. And she was the obvious kind of person who would want to exact revenge, and Cinnamon didn't make as much sense. But she ended up being kind of behind a lot of the stuff, including, I'm guessing, right, the whole basketball playing horse in the school.
I think so. You don't get. I mean, a couple of those feats, especially taking the boy and throwing him back on the antlers,
elk horns,
and pedaling him on the antlers seems like you'd have to be pretty strong to be able to do that. But you don't see the massive figure of Dark Mill South in that scene, and I'm pretty sure that that was Cinnamon doing those things.
But Cinnamon then also being the person who did the arrow through the bottom of the bed, which is a classic Friday the 13th thing, up through the neck of Kevin Bacon. Like, I guess that was interesting too, because there's throughout the whole book, you're kind of supposed to think, oh, Dark Mill South is doing all the killing. But again, there's layers. There's the people who die because of, Melanie. There's people that die because of Cinnamon. There's people who die because of Dark Mill South. And Dark Mill South is really more just kind of like in his own head about shit. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing about that character too, is because he's escaped, and like, so really what we find out overall is like one of his main motivations is, I want to stay free. We kind of discover eventually. But while I'm here, I'm going to kill some people in weird ways too, including perfecting skinning people alive.
Yeah.
Which is one of the grossest things that happens in the book.
It is gnarly. Yes.
And you get to, and it's so cool because you get to see a guy who's so kind of detached from reality for whatever reason, trying to figure out what's the best way
he's practicing
to pull a complete body of skin off of someone by by trying. It's trial and error. He's trying to figure out the right way to do it. And that's even more fucked up than if he just knew how to do it all together, if you ask me.
Yeah. So he gives a few trial cuts on different kids. Yeah, it's crazy. But you do wonder, like, what drew him? I mean, there's a kind of a sense that, like, people are trying to piece together, why is it that the convoy taking him to the next court where he's going to be, on trial for other murders and stuff. Why is it that that the breakdown happens right where it happens, and that he wanders into Proof Rock? I mean, we're trying to, the Gallatin in particular is trying to piece together all the reasons why it happened, but there's just kind of this sense that there's such malevolence that's already here. He's being drawn into it. He's being drawn to this place.
And it's talked about at the very beginning of the book. I want to point this out. This is a quote that I have, what I fucking love. So Dark Mill South, as the convoy's coming through, he sees the Proof Rock sign that's got the graffiti on it with the shark.
Yeah, the Jaws
and
graffiti.
The quote is, "It's probably safe to assume that Dark Mill South, seeing this graffiti through the storm, chuckled to himself with satisfaction. Just as a Marlboro man would feel right at home walking into a forest of cigarettes, so would the Nomad, which is a name given to Dark Mill South, recognize the country his convoy was broaching into. He was even, at this point, facing north." Like, it's almost like you just put him in the exact right spot to be his fucking serial killer self.
Yeah.
Is kind of what that passage at the very beginning of the book is saying.
Yeah. The facing north piece, really, there is this sort of like a kind of a, I don't know, it sounds like it's fate, or there's, the machinations of the universe are positioning things so that, he's going to end up where he ends up. Like there's like the lake is this well of evil. If it had never happened, if it had never been built, if that valley hadn't been inundated, would we be seeing all these? Well, no, you probably wouldn't have much of a population center up there at all. It might all be national forest at this point.
It might be how it's supposed to be. Like,
yes,
to be honest, it might be how it's
I do want to point out, if in the sheriff's office, the police station there in Proof Rock, if the bathroom window were not rusted in an open position, how many people would still be alive now, or would be dead now? Because so many people escaped through that window from the police station in Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper. I'll have to go back and look at Angel to see if they do or not. But the fact that window is rusted open, I think either allows a lot of people to live, or maybe possibly gets a lot of people killed. I'm not sure which.
Probably a combination of both.
Yeah,
But
maybe
that's
if it
beautiful.
were yeah, it's just crazy. Like there's that one little detail I recognize. Like this, is like the 8th time we've heard about between the two books, the fact that someone escaped out of that window. It's Cinnamon or whatever this time, and it's been Jade in the past. Like they need to fix that window. It might really alleviate some of the problems in this town if they simply did the maintenance on the buildings. But that, hey, close enough for government work.
But that's such precision storytelling because it's exploiting the thing that people just refuse to acknowledge as a problem is
Yeah,
causing either good things or bad things throughout 3 books, 1,500 pages of stories
yeah, yeah,
is such good storytelling because it's so true to life. Like
yeah.
if it's a problem now and something bad happens from it, that doesn't mean we're going to fix it. It just means that people know it's a problem. Like, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that like he kept going back to that specific thing because it's so typical of what actual life is like. Like just because
Yeah.
there's a problem doesn't mean it's going to get fixed or solved or whatever it happens to be.
Yep. Yep.
Zooming out so that we can kind of wrap this up. Do you guys have any kind of final thoughts about Don't Fear the Reaper in general? Jesse or Greg?
Greg, go
I got a couple. I got a couple. One is with this reread, I'm becoming more and more convinced that Stephen's most lyrical prose is written it was written for scenes on, around, or under the water. There is something that is just so beautiful and haunting and lyrical about stuff that happens around bodies of water. So I just wanted to point that out. The Melanie POV scene in particular.
Yes.
Like you have a wonderful opportunity to have, again, like the images of the bodies down there just kind of floating. There's this giant catfish or giant fish down there. I don't know the species. There's a giant fish down under that water. And there's even a hint that maybe it's some kind of primordial giant fish. Like, how did it get there? How did this thing get so big and get there? It's almost like this god of the drowned town kind of thing. And then the other, anyway, I love his water lyricism. And then the last thing I'll mention is just thematically, I think we see in this book, and we see it certainly started out in Chainsaw, but we really see it here in Reaper as well. The most damaging thing in the world is for a parent to not be a parent. You see, both Jade's mom and dad, their abdication of their parental responsibilities leads to so much bad. The fact that the town doesn't take care of little Stacy Graves when she's running around desperate, just trying to eat, is a complete failure and leads to many problems. One of the things about Sheriff Hardy that we love so much is that he's a father who's in need of a daughter, and you got Jade, who's a daughter in need of a father, and that's part of what brings them together. And Mr. Holmes as well, when he was alive, played that figure for her too. But that's one of those beautiful things about Hardy. He could easily be, here you got a story about an indigenous girl, and he's the white sheriff in town. That relationship could be very bad. Stephen could have positioned him to be an adversary. Easily could have done that, but no. Like he's, why is he such a beloved figure? I think it's because he's a man who needs a daughter, and he finds that in Jade. But yeah, there's so much of this is about what happens when children can't depend on their parents, and how things fall apart.
Jesse, any final thoughts about the book?
Oh man, I don't know if I can beat what Greg just said, especially since he kind of already touched on some of my final thoughts too. Like a lot of it's the parenthood stuff in these books and in these stories. Final thought, really, I think most simplest thing where Jade's always there, and like you said earlier, Rob, we love Jade. Jade's in our hearts and all that, but in this book, it would be like Chainsaw belongs to Jade. This one belongs to Hardy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, as people might notice, things are a little bit different. My books have changed. On the top of my shelf here, I'm wearing a different sweater. Jesse's
I've got the
gone.
same shirt. I got the same shirt on. So what am I going to
Greg dug it out of the hamper.
do?
But so basically, what happened was when we were going through our final thoughts, I had some kind of catastrophic technical issue with my side on Zencaster, and it was already kind of past how long Jesse had to talk to us. So we wrapped it up, and then in looking at kind of the finished product of what content we had, I knew there was a little bit more I wanted to say. So it is the next day, and Greg was nice enough to jump back on and just kind of be there for like my final thought part.
Well, I wanted to hear your closing thoughts here.
Yeah.
You heard from me and Jesse. What's your like big takeaway from the book?
I feel like in general, it kind of mirroring what Jesse said, like Hard as a Chainsaw was Jade's book, and that that put Jade in our hearts. And Don't Fear the Reaper kind of zoomed out a little bit, and it put Proof Rock in our hearts more. It gave us it gave us Hardy in a different way, and it gave us Letha, and it really kind of it zoomed out, and it gave us an opportunity to experience more of the different characters and to see why they're special. But it also gave us a little bit of a different take on Jade's kind of heritage. And in the first book, I feel like it was very specific to Jade. But in this second book, Jade's more thoughtful about the people around her and is able to think about things like her heritage. And there's a quote. It's probably my favorite quote in the book that I'm going to use about thinking about, her native heritage and how it ties in with the concept of final girls. So I'm just going to read this thing and then we'll talk about it, because I think this is like one of the most powerful things probably in the whole trilogy now that I've read all of it. And this is really long, so man. I apologize. This is really long, but it's good. Jade pulls Letha closer, tries to take all those icy daggers herself. For the 1,000th time, she wonders how the old-time Blackfeet did it. Them and all the other Indians back then, before Gore-Tex, before car heaters, before bags of beef jerky. On a day like this, every day, wouldn't it have just been easier to die? Except they didn't. They pushed through. They insisted. They fought. 50,000 ancestors going back and back, each of them a final girl. But that's just it, isn't it? They were plural, not singular. That's where horror movies have it all wrong. That's where the slasher lies. It's not about a lone girl carving her way to daylight, is it? It's about two girls making it across the ice together. It's not 50,000 ancestors in a single file line. It's clumps of survivors fighting off saber-toothed cats and direwolves and other clumps of people. It's about putting the children and the old people in the middle and then making a circle around them, pointing out with every spear and shaking your head no, saying not this day, not this day. And like, good Lord. Yeah. I'm going to take a moment to breathe, but like, holy crap, is that good?
It is. And it's interesting to to have a trilogy that's built around the idea of the slasher film genre, and then to really turn it on its head and say it gets it wrong here, though. And as you've pointed out, with the further we go, and I'll tell you also for the Angel of Indian Lake for book 3, you do continue to get a more and more expansive view. There are characters in the Angel of Indian Lake that are referred to, but really not seen back in Chainsaw. But they're finally getting a moment to come in, and you get a picture of them. And it really is about, you get a stronger and stronger sense of the community and the evil that's rooted in the community that's got to be kind of dug up and weeded out. And and you've got people sticking together in the entire series. It just becomes more and more that as the trilogy goes along.
Yeah. And I love how he connects the tenacity and the unwillingness to give up of, well, mentioned are the Blackfeet, but basically any Native American who, endured centuries of everything they fucking endured, of just not giving up, never letting go, never giving up, and saying literally that they were all final girls. And I like to kind of tie that to the whole Tab Daniels thing where he's talking about like Indians never die.
Yeah.
And so like equating the characteristics that are in this quote that I just read and connecting it with the thing that Tab said about never dying, it does kind of put final girls in an equal spot of like they are unkillable the way that the slasher is ostensibly unkillable too, and being a foil for that, like that good versus evil thing. And I really like that. But if you want to just talk about an inspirational moment in the book and just like the reverence and the respect and also kind of the heartbreak that it takes to write that about your people and to make it important for us to know about that and care about that too, I thought was really, really impactful for me.
Yeah. And, it is quite significant, I think, that he's got that one phrase in there about putting the children and the elderly in the center and everyone else line out, get your spears out, pointed out from there. It's just like with the parenting aspect I mentioned earlier, we're taking care of, the parents are taking care of the children. The strong and able-bodied are taking care of the elderly and the children who are not able to really protect themselves. That's how it ought to be. Yeah. And that's how it needs to be if we're going to survive as a people. And I think, like these indigenous folks here in North America, but I mean, you could look at any people group, especially those who are not on the equator, of course they're dealing with heat, but man, you go into any of these other more northerly or southerly climes where, you're outside the equator belt and how you survive that kind of cold, and just dangerous conditions and animals that want to eat you and nature wants to kill you. And it's amazing. Yeah. And the only way they're surviving is that, because they're sticking together.
Well, and it makes me think of a interesting dichotomy or a juxtaposition for the specific kind of series. But like the quality that, so I dumbly comes to mind something that happened to me one time. I was out somewhere with my girlfriend and her two kids who are like young. Yeah. And we were just walking through this park and we kind of come around this corner and there's this massive fucking dog that's not on a leash. Yeah. And the first thing I do is I step in front of them. Yeah. And I put myself in between the threat and the people that I care about. And it was just an instinctual thing that you do, but it's what you do to people that you care about, that you want to protect. But think about what happened to Stacey Graves. Everybody turned their backs on her. They treated her like she was nothing. And so like you have kind of the opposite behavior represented in this series. And you see what happens because of it. You see what it does to a person. Yeah. So it almost makes this passage more inspirational, knowing how poisonous not being that way can be to a person.
Yeah, and we need that lesson today. That's not just a problem from the time of Stacey Graves, 100+ years ago, where we still we're finding it. I think in society it's easy to ignore the needs of ethnic minorities. They're less human than the majority. We'll do, we don't, that's not my, it's a different people. That's not my problem. Just weird attitudes that if you were to take out ethnicity and just say it's a child who's homeless, it's a young mother who's homeless, or a man who's, working hard and not getting enough to eat, you just leave it abstract like that. And I think there's a natural compassion, but man, ethnicity continues to be a dividing line, unfortunately, tragically.
Yeah, the otherness in general. Yeah. Like even with Jade being kind of like the town outcast, it wasn't necessarily because of her ethnicity. It was just because she was just the town outcast or whatever. So
she didn't fit in. Didn't fit in very well.
Yep. Yeah. So like the othering of people is just, really poisonous.
It's not sustainable. It's not good. It's not good for the survival of the race. I think we have to look at it that way, as if we're all going to make it through the next like couple hundred years, we all kind of have to stick together. Every human is of infinite value. And that's my belief anyway.
So kind of, back to the final thoughts. I wanted to make sure that was part of it because it's such a huge kind of thought. Yeah. It's such a big, heavy, necessary thought. And I didn't want technical difficulties to get in the way of like that being part of it. But like, Hard as a Chainsaw introduced us to this fucking hero of a person who, despite being treated like she was nothing, she still wanted to help people. And then this zooms out and we see the goodness or the value of more people and what they're willing to do. So I don't know if he could have followed it up better. He just he really grew. He expanded on such a specific thought. But at the same time, and I don't want to downplay this, he brought us some great horror and kills and murder. And I love the fact that Dark Mill South was such a almost kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Not stereotypical, but like he was kind of like the proto slasher.
Archetypal. He's the archetypal Jason type, Jason Michael Myers type of killer monster.
Yep. Really big, really strong. The fact that in the history at one point, he was floating in water and then got electrocuted in the water and continued on, his hand got cut off, his face was disfigured, and he kept going. The fact that he was such an archetypal slasher, but then seeing things from his perspective just a little bit when we did was cool too, because you got to see the mind of this person who was just I saw someone skin an animal one time and I think that would be a cool thing to do to my victims. And peeking behind that insane curtain was pretty cool too. So he did a great job with the horror aspects and the just slasher killing machine kind of thing as well.
Yeah. And then slipping in kind of in the shadow of this enormous, hulking, terrifying killer, slipping in this young lady, let her slide into, in his shadow and do some killing of her own. Really, that kind of sleight of hand, decoy kind of technique, I think is really quite brilliant.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I read My Heart is a Chainsaw, I was lucky enough to have, an arc of that. And I was like, this is revelatory. This is big. Getting to Don't Fear the Reaper and seeing how something that I didn't think he could improve on got improved on. I was just infinitely impressed. And so I was waiting eagerly for The Angel of Indian Lake. And without spoiling or breaking into that conversation we're going to be recording in a few weeks, he just did it such justice. And he, when I had Becky Spratford on recently for our horror preview and she talked about the book, her words were, he gave us a gift. And I fully agree with that. Yeah. I feel like this trilogy is a gift.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, this isn't spoiling anything. I will say that I was surprised just how many threads he's pulled in from the previous two books. How he's really tying up. There's just not a whole lot of loose threads left out there. He brought in some detail that I had just forgotten from the first book. It's oh, now we know what happened in this situation.
Yep.
And there's some insane bloody carnage and and some real mystery and who's doing these things. Some and some wonderful, almost kind of geomythical aspects to Indian Lake, Drowned Town, the dam, the national forest and Little Proof Rock and Dot's coffee shop, and the giant fish down under the water, and you really I think you get an even deeper picture of the land, the place, the landmarks, the places that we've come to know over the first two books. I think you get a good kind of summation of all of that and its significance. It takes on kind of maybe a little bit of a mythic quality in a way.
Yep. Yeah, it's so good. So yeah, that's some final thoughts, and hopefully, here's the thing. I'm wrapping this up by saying anybody who's listening to this deep dive, knowing that the next one is going to be about the Angel of Indian Lake and probably recorded before it releases, I think we have to talk spoiler. I think we have to go full on because it's a deep dive. And so I'm going to pre-warn people who, like, if it's out by the time you listen to this and you're diving into our discussion of the Angel of Indian Lake, it's going to go full on spoilers. So if that's something you want to avoid, we're going to warn you at the beginning of that one too, but I think that's the only way to talk about it. So that's
just
what my
get the
is.
book. It comes out March 26th. If you haven't found an arc already or whatever, just read it, knock it out 3-4 days, and then listen to the episode and see if you agree with our thoughts on it or you have different perspective on it. And more than anything, I hope you'll talk about it on your social channels, talk about it in your book club, talk about it to your friends, let people know. The Jay Daniels character and her circle have really got rooted into the hearts of a lot of readers, and I love that. How many? I don't know. I think tens of thousands of people have read the first two books. I hope it continues to build. And if I had to put money on it, I'd say it's more likely than not that of course, there's no way you can ever know until it gets done. But I bet we'll get a film or a TV adaptation out of the Indian Lake trilogy at some point. My money would be on a TV adaptation because that way you can invest. A studio system could invest in the locations and then get three or more seasons worth of material out of the same sets, buildings, contract actors for 3 seasons worth of episodes, etc. I think that's much more likely than 1, 2, or 3 feature films. But I bet we'll see it on screen at some point, and then all of you can be like, "Oh yeah, I read that back when it first came out." Oh, Jay Daniel. Oh yeah, Jay Daniel and Letha. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Hardy, Dark Middle South. Oh man, yeah, totally. This is. Oh, wait till you get to this point. So we'll all be in the know.
And a couple of quick thoughts. First of all, one of the things that I love about talking about books is, like, again, hopefully you understand that this is us reacting to how a story made us feel. And I would never profess to be the person who knows what it all means. So, like, if we miss something, I want to be a part of that conversation too. If we miss the significance of something, let us know, because, like, I want my understanding of these books to be as, like, complete and open-minded as possible. So yeah, I would love to have any conversation about stuff. If I got something wrong, I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong and like, build on my knowledge and my awareness of the book. Books.
Yeah. Or simply another person reads the same passage and their emotional response is quite different from yours or from mine. That's legit. I mean, this is art, and people respond to art differently. They can take away the same actions by a character as being virtuous or ignoble based on their moral framework. One thing that doesn't disturb one person might really disturb another person deeply based on our experiences, our beliefs, and our reading experience. And that's all legit.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're going to wrap this up, and I want to end by saying thanks to Jesse, who's not here. Thank you, Greg, for agreeing to do this series, because it's like so good. I love having read a book, and I love having thought about a book, but having talked about a book makes it even more dear to me. So, and then obviously biggest of all thank yous probably to Stephen Graham Jones for putting in the hours and letting these, and sometimes maybe letting them live in his head, but maybe sometimes he didn't want them to. But yeah, thank you, Stephen, for all of the amazing, I guess, books and short stories and everything that we've gotten from you over the years. It's been awesome. So thanks. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Rob, for facilitating this and letting me join on your podcast, Jesse and me join your podcast. Love talking about great stories with great people.